Hi, my name is Dan St. Hilaire. I'm an executive counselor for District 2, which covers Rochester, Somersworth, this whole area, going way out through Concord and out towards the Keene area as well. I want to welcome you to this hearing. This is a GACIT hearing. Basically, we're discussing our 10-year transportation plan and going to obviously hear comments from you this evening. But before we do that, we will be giving a presentation. I won't say we. The Department of Transportation will be giving you a presentation. And then the Stratford County or Stratford Regional Planning Commission will also give a presentation. And then we will turn it over to you so you can ask questions. Tonight is actually an appropriate night to start asking questions about plowing, right?
Winter maintenance.
Because I heard it might be snowing by the time we end this meeting tonight. We are actually going across the state holding 27 hearings across New Hampshire to get public input. This is hearing number 27. So this is the last one for all the 5 counselors. And if you have a friend who wanted to provide input but didn't come tonight, or if you think of something after this, you can always write in and put anything down in writing, and do that by November 10th. Send that into the DOT, and they'll review that, and we'll put that and compile that with our package as well. Basically, the New Hampshire legislature ultimately determines what happens here, so we are going to hear your input. DOT will compile that. The GACIT committee will compile that. We will then give it to the governor, and then that will all be turned over to the legislature, and they actually make all the final decisions on the budgetary items. So it is a long process, but it's one that's very worthwhile, and we do take public input to heart. So with that, before we actually proceed, since we have at least one member of the legislature here, Senator Groen, do you want to introduce yourself to the public?
Senator Groen from Rochester, serving Somersworth, Rochester, Barrington, Madbury, and Nottingham. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Are there any other state representatives in the room? Now, I do know we have some people from Senator Shaheen's office, correct? Did you want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Sarah Holmes with Senator Shaheen's office.
And Senator Ayotte's office as well?
I'm Neva Floyd with Senator Ayotte's office.
Is there anybody from Congressman's office? No? Okay. All right. Oh, and I do want to mention, this is being videotaped as well. So we have microphones up here, so we're all set. But when it does come time for the public portion, there's going to be an individual, a gentleman with a microphone right over there. And when I recognize you, he'll run over to you and give you the microphone, and that way the camera and the audio will be in sync with you as well. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Bill here. And Bill, if you can introduce yourself and then start us off.
Sure, thanks. My name's Bill Cass. I'm the Director of Project Development for the Department of Transportation. I'm going to talk off of this handout. I'm going to go through some of the sheets. There's probably more information, facts, and figures there that I'm going to cover. I'm just going to try to hit the highlights and give you a sense of where we are and what some of the factors were that we needed to consider as we updated this 10-year plan. But please feel free to ask questions. If there's anything you're interested in when we get done that I didn't cover. The 10-year transportation plan is just that. It's the state of New Hampshire's transportation plan. It covers all modes of transportation. It covers air, public transportation, highway, bridges. And on page 3 of this handout, it's kind of a pie chart that summarizes the 10-year plan in terms of the major funding areas and the major project areas and the different modes. So you see it's broken down by rail and airports and transit being public transportation. And I'm going to speak first about this biggest piece of the pie, which is labeled FHWA. That stands for the Federal Highway Administration, and that's our federal aid transportation program. That's our federal aid highway program, which makes up the lion's share of our program. It's really the backbone of our program. And on page 4 and 5, there's some information that I'm going to go over relative to the funding. Because as we update this 10-year plan, there are some very real budget and funding challenges that we need to come to terms with. and that are reflected in this update of the 10-year plan. On page 4, some bullets about the information, and on page 5 is the chart that I'm going to refer to up here, labeled the Federal Aid Program, and it kind of outlines some of the funding assumptions and the funding situations that we have to deal with. And we've always tried to, about 4 years ago, when we went through the update of the 10-year plan, the 10-year plan was very over-programmed, it was very over-promised. We figured it would take about 35 years at current funding levels to get through all of the projects that were in the 10-year plan. So that really wasn't serving anybody any good. So during that time we took a very staunch approach to develop a financially constrained 10-year plan where the amount of projects in the plan were approximately matched the anticipated amounts of revenue, so that we could develop and let everybody know what a more realistic plan was. And that philosophy, that approach continues. We do try to not overpromise and deliver and put together a plan that is financially constrained. So the funding piece of it really has a lot to do with how many projects we can do. And 2 years ago, when we updated the 10-year plan, I'm going to stand to point to this. We predicated it on a very traditional funding scenario. The state of New Hampshire, we've for the last 6 or 7 years received about $150 million a year in federal funds for the federal highway program. Traditionally, the state has always matched those federal funds with state funds, state hard match. So $150 million, about $30 million annually go of state funds that match the federal funds, gives us kind of the available resources to program projects. And this blue line represents the average annual value of projects in the 10-year plan. This chart is simplified and summarized. All this information represents average annual cost averaged out over the 10-year plan. Any one year may be a little higher, a little lower, but this is taking the average over the 10 years. So that's what the current 10-year plan was developed based on. But after the 10-year plan was developed, in the last 2 bienniums, there has been no state funds to match the federal program. As we've reconciled, as we've wrestled with the funding issues at a state level and with the state budget, one of the areas that, in order to make ends meet, balance the highway fund, one of the areas that has not been funded has been the state match to the federal transportation program. So our federal transportation program is dependent solely 100% on the federal funds, with no state funds. So, and without any, and we're again taking what we have now and projecting it forward as we update this plan. So that's a revenue gap that we need to come to terms with. The other aspect that we're dealing with, and that's why it's so important that we're 100% dependent on the federal funds, that there are no state funds in here, is that the federal funding is very uncertain as they wrestle with funding and budget issues in Washington. The Highway Trust Fund, the National Highway Trust Fund, does not have enough revenue in it to sustain this level of funding that has been approved in the past. Everything we're seeing and everything that's being projected is that the Highway Fund, the National Highway Fund, can only sustain about 2/3 of the spending that's been approved to date. So everything we're seeing says to anticipate reductions of 30 to 35% in terms of federal funds. For New Hampshire, that means a potential reduction of funds from about $150 million per year to about $100 million per year. So this is where we are today, and this is the context, this is the background that we need to reconcile and take into account as we develop this update for the 10-year plan. So this 10-year plan is based on that far right funding projection of about $100 million per year. It's, we think it's, I won't necessarily say it's the worst case, but it's a conservative estimate. We feel that's the most prudent approach to make at this point, knowing that it's easier to add projects back in than to get through this whole process and have to reduce the program even further because we made wishful thinking in our funding assumptions. So that is the basis and that is the background as we went to update this 10-year plan. So obviously this is the amount of projects that are in the current 10-year plan. This is the anticipated funding. Something has to give, and there are a number of projects, and in this draft 10-year plan there is a list of deferred projects. There are a number of projects that are in the current 10-year plan that at this point in time we don't see how they're going to be able to be funded, so we've put them on this deferred list. We've called them deferred because they're kind of parked. We're taking them, putting them off to the side. If the funding picture becomes more clearer and more optimistic, we then have the resources, or we have the projects, we have the deferred projects identified to maybe draw back in. But for the time being, the projects on this list are deferred for lack of funding. So that's kind of the background as we start forward. I've kind of given you a background of what we have to work with. On page 6 of this handout is kind of a summary in broad terms of where this funding goes. And at the bottom of that slide is a program summary with the projects and the type of projects in the 10-year plan. We've summarized them into some very broad categories of work. And we've contrasted in that first column, that green column, what is currently in the 10-year plan and what is in the proposed draft. And our focus, again with this limited anticipated funding, is going to be on maintenance and preservation of the existing system. So we think it's prudent, that's our recommendation to GACIT, that we need to take care of the existing system, the existing highway system, first and foremost, and keep it in good condition as a top priority. And that's what this draft update of the 10-year plan represents. When I talk about maintenance and preservation, that also includes addressing safety issues. Safety is always first and foremost in our minds. And it also deals with redless bridges. We have a backlog of structurally deficient bridges, and those are critical pieces of the transportation system that need to be maintained, that need to be kept in service. So when we talk about maintenance and preservation, we also talk about prioritizing addressing redless bridges as well. So those are our top priorities, and we're going to continue to maintain and take care of the existing system, paving roads, replacing, rehabilitating bridges. But under this scenario, part of the message here with this draft 10-year plan is that we may not have the resources to do much more than that. And that's reflected in that program summary at the bottom. If you look at the top 2 lines, maintenance, preservation, redless bridges, those continue to receive the lion's share of the funding as we allocate these funding resources towards those top priorities. The third line there deals with, it's labeled I-93 Garvey Debt Service. The I-93 project from Salem to Manchester has long been a high priority for the state and for the department because of its significance to the overall state economy. We have started work on the 93 project, but under this funding scenario, that is one of the projects that we're putting on the deferred list. That the work that's going on currently in the corridor will continue, will be finished, those current construction projects. But we have 2 or 3 construction projects that are ready to go to continue that work. But right at this point in time, we don't see that